We did the ultimate arts, we ranked the character skills, now it's time to cover the passive abilities. Now the passive abilities are typically not going to be as strong as the other two, and it's mainly because that they don't have any cooldowns. It very much is just a perpetual passive buff. And for some characters, it does like slightly add towards their kit. Doesn't really change up too much, but for other characters, it pretty much defines them as a whole. But for today, we are going to take all 8 of them and rank them from worst to best, taking into account both solo play and multiplayer. Starting off at the bottom, we have the Executor passive Tenacity, which this does give you a damage boost and a stamina recovery speed increase when you have been hit with a status effect. And this is a 20% damage boost for 20 seconds, which is pretty much identical to the Exaltation talismans. But the difference being is that it's only going to include you getting hit with the status effect and not also including enemies in the vicinity. Now the buff does activate when you have recovered from the status effect. So for things like Bleed or Madness, it is an instant buff. But for things like Poison or Frost, you have to wait for it to wear off until you actually gain the benefit. And this is just incredibly mediocre because there aren't many circumstances where you are going to get hit by status effects, and for it to only really add 20% more damage for 20 seconds, it is incredibly mid. This thing should have 100% just been when you proc a status effect against an enemy, it would just give you a small damage buff. Even if it was like 5% damage for 10 seconds, it would still be infinitely better than this. Now, yes, the obvious pairing for something like this would be to proc a status effect on yourself. You could do it via the Libra boss relic that can proc Madness upon yourself, although I don't really recommend doing that. You can throw like a Feated Pot at the ground, or better yet, you could use the Seppuku Ash of War. Now, Seppuku is a decent skill. It definitely does pair a lot better with a high arcane character, which the Executor does get an S scaling in arcane. It does give you a flat amount of damage and give you a whole bunch more bleed buildup. But when it does come to Elden Ring and Nightreign, it is a faster paced type of game, so you're not going to really have as many opportunities to really buff beforehand in terms of like a boss fight or like just going through like a camp or a fort. And the fact that it does drain 20% of your health is going to be a downside too, especially because that healing is pretty hard to come by. And when compared to the strategy or the meta of having a poison infused weapon alongside things like Chilling Mist, it's not going to do anywhere near as well, because if you proc Frost on something with Chilling Mist, that's going to be a 20% debuff for 30 seconds, which is pretty much a better buff than having Tenacity. And this doesn't involve you having to take more damage. I don't really know exactly what they were thinking with this particular ability. Maybe they wanted players to like just really hone in on going to like a Seppuku type of build, but it doesn't really make much sense, and it doesn't even complement your character skill or your ultimate art either. Number 7, I'm going to go with the Necromancy passive for the Revenant. Now, I did initially have this one a lot higher because I do enjoy this a whole bunch. And when it does work out, it's extremely powerful and it's really fun as well. It definitely performs best when the bosses are surrounded by like other types of trash mobs. So when you're trying to clear out like a fort or a camp or fight those gank Evergel bosses, even like before the end of day 1 and day 2 bosses, all those trash mobs that spawn in beforehand can all turn into allies, and it can make that end of day fight a lot easier. But the thing is, when you fight all those other single target bosses, which tend to be the hardest ones in the game, like the field bosses, all the enemies inside the castle, and the final Night Lord boss, this passive is pretty much just useless. And even then, for the areas where you can benefit, it's just too RNG heavy. And the amount of times that you actually get to revive one of the enemies as your own ally and have it actually benefit you happens like maybe once a game, if that. Because yeah, I've had plenty of games, especially in multiplayer, where you have a lot less opportunities to get like the final blow or at least an assist on the enemies. It can turn out to be where this thing just doesn't benefit you at all for an entire expedition. But there can very well be some runs where like you kill like a couple of omens before fighting Morgoth, and they can both be summoned for you. Because yeah, there is roughly like a 1 in 4 chance of these enemies being summoned as allies. They're not going to be like super tanky, they're not going to really output the most amazing amount of damage, and they also do only last a minute until they do go away. But just having more allies and summons just on the field just to help take aggro and just do a bit of chip damage can be really good. Like I feel like this passive ability should have had a secondary perk as well to make it be pretty useful in these one-on-one boss fights too, and not just when you're getting surrounded by trash mobs. But it still does its job and it still performs perfectly fine. Number 6, I'm going to go with Eagle Eye for the Ironeye. Now, this passive ability does give you and all of your allies just a boost to your item discovery rate. And this is obviously going to make those rare drops just end up being increased, whether it just be off random enemies or off the bosses as well. Sometimes you can just get higher rarity of stuff. And I feel like when I'm playing the Ironeye, I just end up getting a bit more golds than I otherwise normally would. Now, obviously, this does sound amazing, but just as I was talking about with the Revenant, it can be a bit too RNG heavy. And there can be some games where it does come in clutch, and there can be others where nothing really ever happens. Now, this is mainly going to benefit you more in teams as it would in solo. And that's for multiple reasons. The main reason being is that when you're playing the Ironeye, you're more likely than not going to focus on just playing with bows. And the thing is, there are no regular gold bows in the game. There is a great bow in a lion's great bow, but the Ironeye doesn't benefit of using those more so than any other character. And in fact, that would actually get more damage with the characters that actually have more strength. And even then, I have over 100 games when playing with the Ironeye, and there's been dozens of times where I haven't even found as much as a purple bow, let alone things like gold drops or a wending grace. But when you are playing teams, all those gold weapons, more likely than not, one of your teammates are going to benefit of it. Now, whether or not that gold drop that you get is because of the Ironeye or not, it's hard to really tell. So like rating something like this and putting it in a ranking list when it's so RNG heavy and you can't even tell exactly when you actually are benefiting off it, I can't really put it much higher than number 6. At 5, we have Elemental Defense, which is the passive for the Recluse. Now, this one's a bit hard to talk about because as I mentioned in my character skill video, both the passive and the character skill are kind of intertwined and you can't really have one without the other because the passive ability is what actually makes the affinities even appear to where you can absorb them. And the secondary effect of this passive ability is that when you do absorb them, it gives you 20 FP. So for this ranking video's sake, I'm just going to talk about that specific part of it, just the FP regeneration, which just being able to have a passive way to regenerate FP every single time and a relatively quick animation as well means you don't have to really spec into much when it comes to FP boosting relics, and you can just go all into damage, especially when you're playing teams, because you're almost always going to have opportunities to just absorb affinities and just get FP back all the time. And when you fill up your cocktail, that's pretty much just like a free spell that doesn't consume any FP. Now, 20 FP isn't really anything amazing. That's pretty much the equivalent of using like one Shattering Crystal or like one Knight's Comet, probably even less than that. So if you really wanted to build around your spells, you're probably better off just getting a handful of Starlight Shards because they're going to give you way more FP. But the fact that it is tied to your passive makes it very convenient and very user-friendly. At the number 4 spot, I am going to go with Fighter's Resolve for the Raider. Now, just as I talked about the Recluse, it's the same thing that applies. The character skill and the passive ability are pretty much one and the same. You can't really talk about one without talking about the other. But the criteria is still going to be the same as that character skill video because I put the Raider at number 4 in that video because half of what makes the character skill actually good is because of the passive ability. So I'm just going to put them both at the number 4 spot, and that can balance out to being like one of the best skills in the entire game. Because what the passive ability actually does do is make it to where you don't get staggered out of the skill at all. Like if it wasn't for this passive ability, you would be getting staggered out of the skill every single time and also be able to die as well. Now the character skill does have the damage negation part of it, which you can argue to be more important than having the infinite poise, but having them both be together is what makes the skill be really good because you can't go wrong with being able to tank any single attack in the game, obviously not including headshots. If you get headshot by something, you can still be staggered out of this animation. But it's kind of hard to rank this because it pretty much is just the character skill. I still would have rather the passive ability be separate to the character skill. Like the character skill should have been like, you get to do this attack and you have endure effect alongside with it, which lets you take a lot more damage and not get staggered. And this passive ability could have been something different. At number 3, we have the Duchess passive Magnificent Poise. Now, this passive ability does many different things. It kind of is stated that this character can get like this really quick and unique dodge, which I don't really know why it's stated in the passive effect because no other unique dodges are really stated as the passive. But the most important part of this passive ability is that you do gain the effect of a double dodge and that your attacks and your dodges do consume a lot less stamina. And like it's pretty much non-existent stamina when it does come to the dodges sometimes. And in a game where the stamina cost can be very high, this is an amazing ability, but the thing is, I don't really know why they added this particular passive just to give this character a descaling and stamina anyway. Like it feels somewhat counterintuitive, but the double dodge that she does get is what makes this amazing and what makes this a potentially S tier type of ability because it pretty much allows her to have the best dodge in the entire game. Because not only do you get the really quick version of it, but when you double dodge, it pretty much extends the iframes to be 2 dodges in length. Like sometimes when it comes to like these really long dodging animations, they can be a bit annoying because maybe they have you dodge a bit too far and out of range when attacking enemies. And sometimes you want to have a quick dodge so you can just like quickly attack and punish boss combos. That's why something like a Recluse dodge can be a bit of a downside sometimes, but that's mainly if you are playing at closer range. But with the Duchess dodge, you get the best of both worlds. And the recovery frames for even after the second dodge is pretty much non-existent too. So you can very well just spam dodge the entire time and pretty much not get punished by it. Like that's how powerful this thing can be. At number 2, we have the passive ability Steel Guard. There is not a character in the entire game that benefits as much of their passive ability as the Guardian does. Like, without this passive ability, there would be no reason to use the Guardian at all, because he would be completely and utterly trash. Now, I know people already have that opinion of the Guardian already, even including this passive ability, but that's because they don't know what they're talking about. This passive right here can be the best passive in the entire game. It makes so many boss fights, even Night Lord bosses, be a complete and utter joke. Now, what this ability does do is put you in a special blocking stance when you do click the dodge button while blocking. And this separate stance does many different things. Number 1, it gives you 5 times as much guard boost. And as I mentioned before, this is a game that has stamina cost be a lot more expensive. So when trying to block certain enemy attacks, compared to like regular Elden Ring or the other Souls games, it's not going to be anywhere near as effective. But with this particular passive ability, it would make it even better than it would than all the other games. You can just sit there and block multiple boss combos back to back to back with almost any shield in the game. And if you want to know why just having a good block is really beneficial, it pretty much means that you don't have to learn enemies' movesets or dodge them at all. Now, even then, I probably wouldn't put this at number 2 if it just worked like this, because there is another thing that makes this passive ability even better, and that's going to be a certain relic that allows this passive to do an AoE attack every single time that you block. And being able to just do passive damage, passive stance damage, and be able to stagger many enemies in the game just by blocking is incredibly invaluable, and it can cheese so many things. And when you are in this stance, you can actually slow walk as well. And the benefits of this is that when you have the walking based buffs like Wraiths while walking, Frenzied Flame walking, or the Founding Rain of Stars while walking, you can kill Night Lord bosses without even having to attack. And I'm not even exaggerating this. I literally have done this against the Gaping Jaw. I just blocked the entire time, and he just got stance broken and just died. But another thing that makes this blocking really good is that it synergizes perfectly with guard counters. And guard countering builds are one of the most powerful things in Elden Ring, but they're not really going to be as prevalent in this game due to the stamina cost being high when blocking and the lack of the deflecting tier. But this guy pretty much has an entire monopoly on just guard countering builds, and there are guard countering buffs out there that it can make this entire playstyle one of the best, if not the best, in the entire game. Now, this is kind of mainly due to solo play, where enemies just have less poise and you're always going to gain the aggro, because in teams, it's not going to go as well, and that's going to be the main reason why I didn't put this at number 1, despite no other character benefiting as much of their passive ability as this one. So I definitely feel like this character does need a buff in some area. And if I were to change the passive at all, the one thing that I would change will make it have like a larger hitbox so you can block those attacks that come overhead, because you can normally not block those at all, and make it potentially block status effects and a lot more elemental damage too. And that's number 1. I'm going to go with the Wylder passive Sixth Sense. Now, I didn't necessarily want to put this at number 1. I kind of wanted to put it at number 3 and have like the Duchess ability or the Guardian passive ability be at number 1 instead, because with those abilities, you can pretty much benefit all the time. Whereas for this passive ability, you're only benefiting if you're dying. So with like the best players in the game that are really good, you're pretty much not going to be benefiting off this passive at all. But that is not the case. This list is obviously going to be a lot more inclusive to all players. And the reason why I make these videos is for like educational purposes. And for like 99% of the player base, this passive ability is probably the best thing to have. It kind of works very similar to like Tears of Denial or the Denial spell from the previous games, and that it pretty much lets you survive a death blow. But it actually is better than Tears of Denial because it doesn't leave you at 1 HP, and it leaves you with the amount of health that you had before taking that death blow. So say if you had about 70% of your health left and you took like this insane hard hitting attack, you'll pretty much stay at 70% health, but that passive ability will go away. But the good thing is, as soon as you interact with a Grace, you just get it back again. It lets you just be a lot more aggressive, play a lot more risky, not really play as scared, because you're not going to really get as punished for your mistakes as you otherwise normally would. But another underrated thing about this skill is that it actually gives you this like retreating animation that gives you some iframes. So if you were to get stuck in this like boss combo, it would kind of like knock you backwards and put you in safety. Like yeah, for some people in the game, this passive ability is pretty much non-existent. But when it comes to a beginner-friendly character, it doesn't get better than the Wylder. Okay, that is us now done and completed. As always, let me know what your opinions are down in the comments below. Now, as for the next video, being that we're done with all like the ranking of the abilities, I'm going to touch on more of like the relics side of things, and also just touch on like buffs as well, like in-game buffs, and probably rank some of those things. So if that does interest you, definitely do like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys around. See yous.